Hey, what's up, everybody? Chad Kalick here. I just wanted to thank you for listening to all of these episodes of A Blood Red Sky, Notes from the Most Haunted Structure in the World. If you enjoy this long form content, before you listen to the end of this series, I wanted you to know that I have a series just like this that is 12 hours long called American Ghost Hunter, The Devil in the Details. It is everything you could possibly want to know about my childhood haunting. While the Blood Red Sky Notes from the Most Haunted Structure in the World series has a lot of comedy and it's really intense at times, what I can tell you about The Devil in the Details is that it is very scary, it is very dark, and it is very emotional. And if you've seen American Ghost Hunter, it's an incredible companion because everything that I talk about in The Devil in the Details is not really in American Ghost Hunter, which this starts out right before I went to Persia, right before we moved there, and it takes me into my early college years. So the amount of information that's there is incredible, it's highly detailed, and 99% of it is not in the American Ghost Hunter movie. So if you enjoy the super long form storytelling content, I'm going to leave a link below, and you can actually purchase American Ghost Hunter, The Devil in the Details, as there's pretty much two ways to support the podcast financially. One way, of course, is Patreon, which you guys have done an amazing job. It's still growing. And the other way is through the purchase of these long-form series. And that is why I released the Blood Red Sky Notes from the Most Haunted Structure series, so you can get a taste of what these long-form storytelling series feels like. So if you really want to know the whole story of my childhood and everything that my family endured in our haunted house in Persia, why we moved there, all the new revelations and details and things that I discovered both during and after that, again, were not in the American Ghost Hunter documentary, click the link below and you can purchase that series and you will get all 11 episodes over 12 hours long. You'll get it all at once. There will be no wait time. You'll get a list with every episode, the passwords, and off you go. Having said that, enjoy the final 3 episodes. I just put them all together so you can just cruise right through of A Blood Red Sky, Notes from the Most Haunted Structure in the World, episode 9, 10, and of course the finale. Much love, everybody. Enjoy, and thank you all for listening to my storytelling. Bye-bye. When we first decided upon filming at Chillingham Castle, Ciaran told me that he was working on something special and that I should schedule an extra day or two at the very end of filming should he be able to pull off what he was working on. So the morning after Joey's investigation and his part of the experiment, we stayed up talking and laughing probably till 3 or 4 in the morning. And then we all, got a good night's sleep. And I remember waking up and walking around that castle and just marveling at it. I mean, it was such an incredible, incredible structure. And I took the time to walk almost every inch of it, to really take it in, because I don't know that I'll ever be back there again. I mean, I never want to feel or believe that I've seen something for the last time, just because, life is a long life and forever is a long time, so I always want to feel like I'll be back to somewhere, but I didn't know, so I took it all in, and man, it was just so crazy to me how this place that seemed so menacing the whole time that we were there could suddenly, on the flip of a dime, just seem like a living piece of artwork, and that's the best way to describe it. It seemed like a person, like it had a a soul. It seemed like it had a heart. Like it gave us what we wanted, you know. I came there hoping for an outcome. And that's a big part of this entire experiment as well. As a whole, I got exactly what I wanted. A unique documentary, unlike anything else that had ever been filmed before. You know, doing a fresh, new idea and concept for the paranormal, to test aspects of the paranormal that had never been tested in that fashion. You know, in order for that to happen, so many things had to happen that were all, you know, 1 in a billion opportunities or chances. So it was weird. I felt a real connection to the castle, and like it was a person. It was crazy. Chillingham just came alive that morning, and you know, I slowly watched people wake up and make their way into breakfast. And thankfully, I was in the breakfast hall when Joey woke up, and he walked in and sat down, and he did. He had a proud look on his face, and you know, I gave him some bro knuckles, and we didn't say a word to each other. I just gave him a big hug, and he looked at me and just kind of shook his head like, "Wow, you know, this was an adventure," and it was. But what I also knew is that none of them knew, you know, just how special this whole process was, because they weren't able to see it from my angle. You know, being the hand that will control the edit and putting all of their stories together, I knew what we had on film. I knew it was special, and I knew that it connected like a puzzle, you know, and they hadn't seen the puzzle yet, so they each knew what their role was, but they didn't know the picture that they made together. You know, they could have never seen that at that point, so they didn't really ultimately know what a blood red sky was going to be. You know, and that was definitely a mystery that remained, and they were all vocal about it. You know, Joey talked about that. Like, I can't wait to see what this all was, you know, because he was so in his world and so focused on his role. You know, same thing with Justin, same thing with Mary Beth. So we had an awesome breakfast, and Ciaran is just the funniest guy in the world. He was just from start to finish. And Ciaran, if you ever listen to this, I know I've told you this to your face before, but it truly was a pleasure, man. Working with Ciaran. He's such an intelligent guy, and you know, I'm glad when it all came out, he saw my intention, that it was true, and that I was honestly trying to, you know, create something that had never been created, and I was trying to raise the bar and test new waters, and I truly believe that he did respect that. So after everybody ate, we decided it was time to leave, and Ciaran told me that his surprise had come through, and we were heading to a place called Tutbury Castle. And I did not know what that was, but he quickly explained to me that Tutbury Castle was the oldest and largest castle in all of England, and it was actually owned by the Queen of England. And in order for us to film there, we had to get permission directly from the Queen, which he had a number of relationships and connections that he had gone through. And believe it or not, we got permission from the Queen to film at Tutbury Castle, in which others have tried and did not get permission. So how he was able to do this, I don't know, but it was incredible, because the main I guess what would have been the main doors that you go into the castle. Those two buildings had been restored, but 97% of the castle had been blown apart and had been during a war. It was basically, they just bombed it, and you could still see the outline. You could still see the foundation still existed. So you could follow that foundational line all the way around this property, and you could visually see how big the foundation was of this castle, and it was incredible. I mean, we're talking city blocks. I mean, like if you went to New York, how big those city blocks are. This thing is probably 5, 6 city blocks, like big. I mean, it was massive. And it seemed like such a fitting place to end this first step, I guess you can call it. Because like I said, Blood Red Sky to me never felt like the end of anything. The whole thing felt like the beginning of something. And the reason it seemed so fitting is because, and we haven't talked about this yet, or I haven't talked about this yet on purpose, because I wanted to wait till this point in the telling of the story to bring it up. But the lead marketing thing that we went with to kind of capture everybody's attention, and something that we all watched and talked about the whole time, was the December 21st, 2012. The whole Mayan, the end of the Mayan calendar, which so many people around the world thought that it could potentially mean that the end of the world was coming. Now, like I said, this all came from a single author. It's in the very first scene of the entire movie. His name's Michael Coe. And it was just one author. That whole narrative that the world's going to end in the Mayan calendar, it came from one author, a guy named Michael Coe, and it was just, all it was is his interpretation of the Mayan calendar. That's it. Just his interpretation. That is it. It was not, anything that the Mayans ever said. It's nothing that the Mayans proclaimed. It wasn't. It was a white dude. Some white dude that was not Mayan. So the calendar ends here, so the Mayans must have meant that is when the world ends. When actually, the Mayans' belief was that would just be the end of a final cycle, like this 6,000-year cycle. And when it ended, it would restart, and there would be what they call a golden age of understanding, and a new world would exist. So the whole idea of Tutbury Castle, of it being destroyed, but now these two buildings had been restored, and now the foundation was being restoring. The whole concept that if 2012 came about and Armageddon happened, the idea that mankind could rebuild anything that we lost, it just all seemed so fitting, that we were there. And once again, the fact that Ciaran was able to gain permission for us to film there, was this something that, he subconsciously created, or something we all did, wanting something special to end it? Was this reality something that, one of us made happen, or all of us collectively? Again, this is for you to decide, ultimately. But so many things just happened exactly how we wanted them to happen. But the reason the 2012 thing was so interesting to me is because as 2012 got closer, the first 7 minutes of the film, shows all these incredibly bizarre things that were going on all over the world as December 21st, 2012 became closer. Giant rivers turning blood red. In India, blood red rain fell from the sky. There was mass animal kill-offs and mass beachings and bizarre behavior from birds. I mean, at the stroke of midnight in 2012, when that year came in Beebe, Arkansas, 300 birds just fell from the sky, dead. Um, there was just so many strange things happening. And I remember reading the story about, I believe it was Stanford. They conducted this experiment where people all over the world basically sat and looked directly at a random number generator all over the world in like 6 different places. And this random number generator would just click out zeros and ones, just binary code 100001111111000, and just keep doing it. And all of these people were monitored at the same time. Okay? At the same time. Half of them were told to focus on more ones than zeros, to think about if more ones were to pop up than zeros. And the other half were told to focus on more zeros popping up than more ones. Okay? And this is a real study. Like, what do you think happened? What do you think happened? Exactly what they wanted to happen. Everybody who focused on more ones popping up than more zeros, that's exactly what happened. The random number generator started kicking out more ones than zeros. And on the flip side, everybody who focused on more zeros than ones, the same thing happened. And there was no rational explanation for why this happened, but it did. It happened. Which, again, made a lot of people wonder, wow, is consciousness, is that a dimension? Is it something that can be controlled? Can we control it? Because if we could, think about what that would bring to the world. Just think about that. Think about what that would mean if we discovered that our minds actually physically altered our reality. And what if we could pinpoint the part of our mind that did that? And what if we can gain control over it? I mean, we could, Jesus, if you can do that, I mean, you could end suffering. I mean, that's how big this concept is. I could end suffering. You can just control outcomes. You can control life or death. There would be, anything would be possible if you could control reality. Now, maybe that's too far of a stretch, and maybe I'm losing some of you at that point. And admittedly, I am a grand thinker, so maybe that isn't possible. But even on a smaller scale, what if it wasn't as simple as, or wasn't as grand as, like, if I could control my fate and reality through my subconscious, I could stop suffering. What if it was just something like just simple healing? What if I could, make the placebo effect real? I mean, what I mean by that is, what if you could actually heal yourself without actually having to take medications? Because we've seen that in science, right? We've seen it on both sides. There's hypochondria, where you believe that you have an illness and you start showing signs of that illness. Physical, medical signs. You start suffering the same ailments because you believe it. And we've seen placebo, which is the opposite effect, where you start healing or feeling better because you believe you have medicine. So we know that portion of the mind exists, but what if we can control it? What if we could turn it on and turn it off? Now, scientists argue that concept alone is pseudoscience, and to that, my problem with science, I shouldn't say my problem, because obviously I back and support science, of course, but my problem with it is it always assumes that it's on the cutting edge. But 100 years ago, what we believed to be scientific, we laugh at today. And you know what? Everything that we believe today, in 100 years from now, we will look back and we will laugh at the things that we think and thought we knew. Okay, so is this that crazy? When you look at the experiences that we had in that castle. They all followed exactly what we wanted. All of them. So then we start looking at all of the bizarre things that were happening around the world, as December 21st, 2012 approached, they were all in a line with like this global consciousness of fear. And if you don't know what global consciousness is, it's exactly what we demonstrated at Chillingham Castle, but on a microcosmic level. Basically, it's groupthink, right? The collective subconscious of a group. Now imagine this happening around the world. The world at that time was filled with this fear that on December 21st, either something bad's going to happen, something's going to change, and at the very extreme, people thought the world's going to end. And no matter who you were, if you're being honest about this, no matter who you were, even if 99% of you said, that's bullshit, the world ain't going to end, there was that small part of you that went, man, what if it does though? What if those Mayans are onto something? Because I guarantee you, most people have no idea that the Mayan theory, the end of the world theory, came from this one author, Michael Coe. Everybody had that sliver of doubt. And as December 21st drew closer and closer and closer, the world started acting weird. There were things going on in nature that have never been seen before or since, and that is a fact. There were things going on around the globe at that time that made no sense, that the top scientists in the world were going, what is going on? What is going on with the planet right now? Well, what I think was going on is, global consciousness, a global consciousness of fear. But what's exciting about that, and what got me so excited about it in relation to this film, is exactly what I said in the movie. If a global consciousness of fear can create uncertainty, destruction, despair, death, all of these things, then what could a global consciousness of hope and positivity create? Because the one thing we know about the yin in life, there's always a yang, right? If there's darkness, there's light. If there's anger and sadness, there's hope and love, right? There's always the opposite. So if we're creating this negative output by everybody worrying, there should be a way to reverse it. And I don't think that is a crazy thought. I don't think that is a crazy belief. I think it's as old as people believing that there's strength in numbers. I think it is time-honored as saying, as I said before, stay positive. We grow up saying that. When somebody is in a bad situation, we say stay positive. Stay positive. And it's the one thing that I think everybody can agree upon. And I'll tell you why I say that, because before we left Chillingham Castle to go to Tutbury, I took one last walk around the place, and I went back into the courtyard one last time to see if I could hear those children sing. That beautiful, beautiful sound of the children singing. And there were no children singing. I didn't hear it. And I looked through all the windows at the mannequins one last time and thought, that's creepy, but, it was weird. That morning in the daylight, it actually looked kind of beautiful. And I thought, man, conquered Chillingham, I got a big smile on my face, and I turned around, took one step, and I screamed bloody murder because I ran right into the chest of Sir Humphreys. For the fourth time, I screamed bloody murder. He was like 2 feet behind me. I never heard him walk up. I don't know how the hell he appeared there. But I started laughing, after I freaked out, I started laughing. I was like, man, you are scaring me. And he just looked at me like, what is wrong with you, boy? And I ended up shaking his hand, and we got talking about what we were doing there. And man, I tell you what, he did not. He didn't really believe in my theories, and at one point he even called me stupid. He was like, "Well, that's," or he said, "It's a stupid thought. You have some stupid thoughts." He said to me. I think he was just more pissed off that every time I saw him, I would scream. Um, but the one thing we agreed upon, man, is that there is an innate belief that staying positive creates a positive outcome. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. You know, no one ever thought to say to somebody that's in a bad spot, well, hey, listen, man, just stay real fucking negative. I mean, everyone always says that. And he had some interesting thoughts, Sir Humphreys. We were talking about how I said that I think, man's belief, the ability to dream is such an important thing because I believe that the subconscious has power and ability to actually create fate and destiny. And he understood where I was coming from, but he said it's bigger than that. He said it's the flaw of monkey man, and that was such an interesting concept. I said, "What do you mean the flaw of monkey man?" And he said that as complex as human beings are, they still have the flaw of a monkey, which means that they're so stubborn that they will attempt the impossible, and they will fail like better each time until eventually they conquer the impossible because they weren't wise enough to realize that they never should have tried. It was kind of like ignorance is bliss, right? Like the ignorance of a child, right? It's like they can accomplish things because they don't know that they shouldn't be able to. And I agreed with him completely there. And it was the first time he'd ever put it that way to me, the flaw of monkey man. And he just said basically monkeys are that way, that they will decide they want something and they'll attack it in a certain fashion, whether it's likely or not, or whether they're likely to succeed or not. And they'll keep failing at it over and over and over and over and over again until one finally accomplishes it, even though they shouldn't have been able to, which I think is just brilliant because I think that's accurate about man. And he also said monkeys have great egos and they just believe in themselves infinitely, and it's a flaw. And that mankind is that way, that we have, we believe that we're the smartest, brightest, fastest, strongest. And it's why we do so much damage to the world, but it's also why we create so many special things. So it's kind of like a yin and a yang again. And so, yeah, it was an interesting talk with Sir Humphreys, in which I finally apologized and said, I am sorry for jumping. And I explained to him each situation. I said, man, one night I looked at all the different mannequins and you were the last one. I didn't realize you weren't a mannequin. And when you moved your head, it freaked me out. And the whole time we were there, it was so strange. It was like Sir Humphreys was this hovering presence that was he was just always there, but never really there, never really in front of you to touch. He was always looking over, we were able to determine, I could tell you guys this, there was a time period during Justin's investigation where we think that some of the knocks that he heard might have been Sir Humphrey, because he had a bedroom that he was staying in down the hall, and we did capture Sir Humphrey roaming through one of the halls at one point. I think he was going to the bathroom, to be honest. I think that's what was going on. But yeah, he was always there, ever present, and he owned the place. Interesting guy, man. There was one time we just heard him, and he was riding one of his horses, and I guess this horse stumbled and went down or something, and they deemed that it needed to be put to sleep. And we heard somebody shoot the horse, and oh my God, it was a terrible sound, terrible situation. And I don't know anything about riding horses or keeping them or anything like that, but I just remember that happened. That was really sad. I was like, man, this horse got killed. But he rides horses around there all the time, and I remember he was talking to Mary Beth too. It was so interesting about her bloodline and John Sage's girlfriend or wife that he killed, her bloodline, and how Mary Beth was distantly related to her. And everybody in England that we talked to, they knew their ancestors like thousands of years. They knew them, and I was like, that's so crazy because in America, our history is only 200 years old. Um, and like I know a couple centuries, I guess, or maybe 1 century or two of my family's lineage, but that's about it. But everybody we talked to over there, from Sir Humphreys, um, to the local, to like Graham, to any of the local people that helped with the castle that came, or cameraman, like they all knew their lineage just for, man, like I said, for thousands of years. It was really, really crazy. Um, but Sir Humphreys, what I read later, he actually got the castle. Is quite controversial. He got the castle through marriage. It was not in his family's bloodline, but he married a woman who owned it, and they later, or she passed away and left it to him. And he was now the man who watched over it and owned it and controlled it. And but he got it through marriage, and it was controversial because there were people that were writing online and stuff, feeling like that he should have sold it back to the original bloodline family that owned it, which he did not. Um, but yeah, what an interesting. I wish we could have had more time to talk with him, even though he was offending me, and even though I accidentally offended him. I truly enjoyed talking to him, even if he did call me stupid. I didn't care. He was just a fascinating guy, and it was really interesting talking to him. I wish we'd had more time to do that. Um, but no, so we found ourselves at Tutbury Castle, and I'll tell you one funny story of Tutbury. Right when we got there, Ciaran, I don't know where he was at, but somehow Joey was riding with Ciaran, and they got way behind us. And I don't know how we got there first, but we did. We got there right on time, and when I say we, it was myself, Mary Beth, and the cameraman. And we got there and we were waiting, and Justin, and we were waiting for Joey and Ciaran and the other cameraman. And so I got there, and inside the main building, because Tutbury is just basically two buildings, which is the entrance to what was the castle. And then, like I said, it's all foundation from there. But I go inside and I'm really hungry, and they're selling sandwiches, like fresh sandwiches. And I'm like, oh, wow. So I go up and I'm like, what do you have to drink? And they had like, orange juice and just water. And they had a fresh, it was turkey and onion sandwich. And I was like, oh, that sounds so good. So I got this turkey and onion sandwich, and I asked them for mustard, and they handed me mustard, and I love mustard. And I opened the mustard up, and I just covered my sandwich with it and handed it back, and they looked at me kind of weird. And I remember thinking, man, they must have never seen somebody cover a sandwich in mustard like that. That's an American thing, I guess. And so I just handed it back to them, and they just walked away. I'm like, what's their problem? And as I walked away, I took a big bite of the sandwich, just mouthful of mustard, and proceeded to lose my fucking mind at how hot that mustard was. Nuclear. I am telling you, I have never in my life been like terrified to the point like we need to call the ambulance. Like, I don't know what was going on. That stuff was so hot. I've had spicy. I didn't even know it was spicy, but I've had spicy mustard before, and I love hot foods. I mean, I'll eat habaneros. I'll sit and watch TV and just snack on habaneros. Like, I love I am telling you, the heat that came off that mustard damn near killed me. I bought 8 bottles of water in a row and just kept chugging them. And then once I got water gulged, I would just chug, swish, and spit. And I had to keep repeatedly doing it just to keep the burn. I mean, it was like acid. It was like I took a bite of acid, guys. It was absolutely brutal. And I remember everybody just like, oh my God. And Mary Beth, everybody was just staring at me like, what did you do? Because I could barely speak. I could barely tell them. It was just, I had the sandwich and you don't eat it. It was ungodly. And it took about a half hour for that to wear off. It took about a half hour. So eventually, after I was able to put out the nuclear meltdown in my mouth, Ciaran and everybody showed up, and we shot our final scene, and it was just really cool. I mean, we definitely felt a sense of accomplishment, and we had all decided that with us being over there, it's really interesting. You can fly almost once you're in Europe, you can go to almost any European country for like $150. And I had found flights to go to Ireland just for 2 days. I'd never been. And I had always wanted to go to Dublin really bad. And so once we were done filming, before heading back to the States, I got the chance to, Mary Beth and I, and one of our financiers as well that was over there, we all got the chance to go to Dublin. And Justin and Joe did too. Yeah, they kind of did their own thing though. They were off doing their own thing. The thing is, I don't drink, and it's not that I don't. It's not that I don't drink because I have, problems with alcohol per se. I just have an addictive personality. Period, and I just got tired of hangovers, and when I drink, I get really, really drunk. And if you listen to the In a Crowd or the AGH podcast, you know that I just came to a point in my life where I just didn't want it anymore. So I just stopped. And it's not that I fear it or anything, but I'm just never really in the mood to get really blasted or anything. And Joey and Justin like to party, so they kind of did their own thing. And I really took in Dublin, Ireland, and just really got to see the city and went on carriage rides. You guys can maybe laugh at me for this, but my favorite thing in the world to do is to take a carriage ride. I just love the vibe, the kicking back, and the sound of the horses, the cluck, 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 cluck. I just love that vibe. And there was an awesome carriage ride in downtown Dublin that just took you everywhere, And then I had just watched the documentary Knuckles, and it was about this Irish family that would do bare knuckle fighting. And, oh gosh, I can't remember their names. But I remember the name of the family at that time. And, it's spelled Joyce, Joyce, but they pronounce it Jice. So they were like, I'm the Jice family, he's a Jice. And I ended up going to this I went with Mary Beth to this big church in downtown Dublin that was turned into a bar. And I went down there just to kind of hang out and take in the culture and meet the locals. And believe it or not, we actually met a member of the Jice family. And he was a big old thumper that was involved with the bare knuckle fighting, which is highly illegal. But it was super cool. It was a great way to end that entire experience. And after spending a couple days there, we ended up heading back home. And I knew I had a tremendous job ahead of me. And I knew that there would be, a great story in the footage. But what I was most excited about, once I got the film done, I was most excited for everybody to see it so they could see what I saw. Because when I was there, we didn't talk about it like collectively. Like we talked about what each person did. So I knew until they saw the film, like I mentioned before, they wouldn't ultimately know how all the pieces fit together, and that exactly what I had theorized in every aspect, from the big picture of the film to actually completing it and having it all play out this way, to the individual stories, to, Mary Beth switching with me. Like those guys, didn't even know that I was switching from doing the sleep deprivation. Mary Beth knew, because remember I said she had to know a little bit because she had to kind of help me steer this thing. But they didn't even know that she switched with me. Um, or at least I know Joey didn't. So I knew they hadn't seen it yet. And when they did see it, I felt like, man, they're going to see that this isn't just bullshit theory, that there's something to this. Yes, yes, I agree that this experiment could have been refined even more, and there's probably even better ways to do it. But they're going to see that there's something here. There's something to this that's very, very real. And I couldn't wait to see what would happen if we put that practice into our real life. If now, having gone through, through all that, if we said, okay, well, there seems to be something here that implies that this is actually real. So what will now happen in our regular daily life if we do apply this? And I wanted to see what would happen. And but first I had to edit. The edit itself, I've said this before. You guys may have heard me say this if you've been to the shows. It was the easiest edit that I have ever done for a film. And the reason it was the easiest edit, guys, is because there was nothing really to, play with as far as the edit goes. I mean, that film is as it was. I mean, the only thing that I was cutting out was time, right? Because you obviously shrink these experiences into an hour and a half movie. That was really all I cut out, was just time. It was the most straightforward edit. I did not suspect that would be coming, but it was just so simple of a story to tell. You simply just had to tell what happened as it happened, And it was probably the fastest edit that I've ever done. I think the entire film to edit took, I want to say, a month, 4 weeks. That was it. And that wasn't like 4 weeks of 20-hour sessions. I mean, that was, doing it at a pace that was fairly, I had a couple 20-hour days, but most of the time it was, 8 to 12 hours a day of editing, 5 days a week, taking a couple of days off to come back and look at the edit. But it was crazy how fast it all really went. And when it was all said and done, it was my favorite edit that I had ever done. It to this day is my favorite film. And it's weird because, like, when I get asked what's your favorite film, well, my overall favorite film was A Blood Red Sky. But, like, for the paranormal, for ghost hunting, that type of thing, I think Sir No Face is really hard to beat. When it comes to, like, dramatic storytelling, American Ghost Hunter is very unique. That will always be a special film for me. But when it comes down to, what was my favorite, like, film that I've ever cut together, ever, it was A Blood Red Sky. I just think it's completely unique of anything else that's out there. And if I'm lying, I'm dying, man. Go find another film and tell me to watch it and tell me what's, something that's like it. The one comparison that people have said that they have drawn, similarities to, and it absolutely does not offend me because they absolutely picked out the film that inspired me the most, is Clockwork Orange. The film has definite scenes in it that remind me of that. Specifically speaking, the one that that is glaring is Justin watching the footage, all the really bizarre, terrible footage that he had to watch, and just his reactions. That was very similar to the A Clockwork Orange Ludwig van scene, where it's Ludwig van, like that whole scene where he's forced to watch that footage. And that was in my mind. And clearly, A Clockwork Orange being, having Malcolm McDowell and a series of, actors with strong accents and stuff, having Graham there with his strong accent, and also Ciaran with his accent, and being in a castle, like that whole setting, definitely gave off that vibe. So that is true. People that have pointed that out, they are accurate. That is the film that inspired me the most, was A Clockwork Orange. And having said that, for the finale, of course you guys need to know what everybody thought of the film that experienced it once they actually saw what went down. And the most obvious way to end this podcast series would, of course, be to inform you all of what happened in our lives when we actually put the Blood Red Sky experiment to play. Did it matter? Did it change our fate and destination and our reality? Or is the secret and psychokinetic ability all nothing more than pseudoscience? I think you'll be really surprised by the results of the Blood Red Sky experiment. After finally returning home and editing the picture and sending it out to the team, the most exciting conversation that I had the whole time about the film was with Joe. And I was praying when we began this whole project that the day would come where Joe would see exactly what I was trying to accomplish. And thankfully he did. I will never forget the phone call. It was completely heartwarming, because when I stood there and looked at Joe and tried to tell him, after he was just choking himself trying to throw up, that I would never do anything like that, those were words, you know? And if you watch that scene when I'm trying to put my hand on him, and I keep saying this, there's just so much in a touch, and he just wouldn't let me. He's just moving across the room. You know, it was like whichever direction I stepped, he moved the opposite way. That was a terrible thing to experience with somebody that I love so much and I genuinely care about. So I was praying that when it was all said and done, that we would get to have a conversation and that he would see the big picture and he would understand why it was so important to place so much pressure on him. The thing about Joe that you have to understand is he is, you know, I mean, arguably my favorite person in the world. I mean, and I mean that in such an uplifting way. Like, you can insert Joe into almost any situation and the room is brighter. You know, he's one of the few guys that has the ability to take the attention away from me to where I become a fan of him. And that may sound really arrogant. I don't mean it that way. I just have a big personality when I'm in social groups. I have a large voice and I'm opinionated and I speak freely. And Joey has that same thing, but he's just so charismatic and so fun. And he's just so likable, you know? So the idea that I would hurt someone like that I genuinely revere as my brother, was just something I never wanted to do. But I knew the potential was there. And I knew that if this whole thing went wrong, I could lose, you know, one of my best friends on planet Earth. So when he called me, he was like, dude, I had no idea this was all going on. I had no idea since the very beginning that you were trying to do things to make things harder for me. He was like, I kept wondering because nothing was easy, man. You know, and I'm like, yeah, you know, and he goes, and I just can't even believe that I never even stopped to ask what I took. And I just, you know, he's like, I was just so overwhelmed, you know, with the fact that I didn't want to take a psychedelic that, you know, it was just, he saw it all. He saw it all. And he was so proud, you know, he was just like, so there's nobody else on planet Earth that's ever done what I did, right? I'm like, yeah, no, never, never. You are the only one. You are the only human being alive that has that experience. And you overcame it like a champ. And he was so proud on the phone. He was so proud. And it made me proud. It made me proud that I stuck it through as best that I could, and that I attempted this. And it made me step back and wonder, is this a fate and destiny that my mind created? Because that conversation is exactly the conversation I hoped when this was all over that we would have. But think of how many things had to go right for us to have that conversation. The reason this film was so difficult to make, and I can't stress this enough to the people that backed me and supported me and helped me finance this film, the reason it was so hard to make is because when you start it, there's absolutely no guarantee of where it's going to go. Forget the negative possibilities, and it could just wind up where nothing happens, and all my theories are wrong and nothing works out. But, it could also just wound up being a bunch of people on vacation, if nothing goes down and if the experiments aren't working and there's nothing really interesting to follow, you can't make paranormal activity happen. You can't make these outcomes happen. I suppose you could if you hired a bunch of actors and you scripted it out and, but it's obviously, very obvious, I would hope, to anybody watching if this was a real scenario and that nothing was scripted, nothing was acted out, nothing, period. The only person that had, their hand in the direction of things was me, and it wasn't through a script format. It was just through choosing what people would do and when. That's all I did, is I set up the framework. On this day, Justin will do this. On this day, Joey will do this. Joey will sleep here. Joey will fly in this seat. Joey will, there's little things I did, on the airplane over. I told you guys the tiramisu thing. Not getting Joey an extra water. Things like that. But these are not storyline elements. Joey could have as very well said to me when I came up there and he was trying to choke himself to puke, he could have just said, listen, I'm not doing anything. I'm done. This is not what I signed up for, man. Good luck with your movie. I don't give a shit. I'm done. And I would have had to have accepted that. It's not like I can make him do it, Once he's there, he's there. There is no making him do anything. It's the same thing with Mary Beth. What if she just got so tired and so beat up that she's like, I'm checking out, man. I can't do this. And Justin at times thought the whole thing was getting just stupid because he just couldn't follow where I was going and what was going on. He didn't have everybody's journey in his vision. Where from my view, it's a bird's eye view. I can see everything that's going on. He's too worried about his own personal situation. And at times, Joey's to really see the big picture. He's not seeing what does Ciaran think. He's not present for the private conversations that I'm having with Ciaran. He's not present for the private conversations that I'm having with Mary Beth. Or when I pull Joe, aside. He doesn't know what's going on across the board. So he could have been the same way. He could have been just like, this is stupid, dude. I'm checking out. I don't want to be a part of this. And Ciaran could have. At any moment, Ciaran could have just went, listen, I helped you. I got you here. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish here. I can't see the finish line in this thing. I don't think it's working out. At the end, he, could have just said, listen, I think it was all a failure. And none of these theories panned out. I'm just listing all of these things because I want you guys to see how badly this thing could have gone. But oddly enough, it went perfect. It went perfect. So when I finished watching the final cut, I just said to myself, I've got to apply this theory into real life. All the while knowing that the experiment itself, yes, of course, you can be critical about, my methods, did I have to use fear to incite emotion and things like that? But the point is, someone had to start down this road. I mentioned that in the last podcast. Someone had to start down this road. And it was a start. And there were some major elements that made us all stop and go, wow, Do we, in fact, control our fate and destination? So I started like trying to apply this in my daily life. And I started with a really kind of juvenile type of approach to it, in the sense that I started thinking about like items, like things like I really want a new PlayStation. I hadn't bought one for years, and at the time I couldn't afford it, so it was just like, I really want this to happen by the end of the month, and let's just put it out there that it's going to happen by the end of the month, and I'm going to believe in it, and somehow it'll come in. And the weird thing was, the more and more I focused on items and like possessions and things that I wanted to acquire. I didn't really feel much of an effect on that, and I realized that it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, in the sense that it's not, or at least I don't feel it works that way. It's not like you can just go, man, I want a Lamborghini, and suddenly you get a Lamborghini. I didn't see any kind of change in my life when it went to putting out into the universe that I wanted possessions. But what I did see a change is when I started putting out into the universe broader scale desires. At the time, Laura and I were just kind of in a rough patch at that time, and part of it was just because I was gone so much. And, that didn't stop. When I came back, I was editing in between, still filming, for other projects, and still filming for, the very, very final end of Paranormal State. And, it was over the course of like a month, things between her and I got so much better. And it was due to things, again, that were small decisions that were made at the beginning of the month. And by the end of the month, it ended up being a massive thing. Just a simple thing like, hey, I was going to go to Iowa on this date and, be a part of this event, but we decided to move the event to a different date. And then it just so happens that Laura ended up having, time off that coincided. And suddenly we had this extra 3 days in the middle of the month that we could spend together. And those 3 days ended up being absolutely awesome. And that kind of reset the tone for us connecting. And by the end of the month, I was like, wow, I didn't necessarily realize it as it was happening, but it was getting better. Like, things were getting better. At that time, I was kind of in a little argument with my father. And it was over something private that's not even worth talking about now. But, I remember saying to myself, man, I just hope there's a way that this can, be resolved, because it's so silly and stupid that we're fighting over it. And it ended up being a time where I actually called him about something completely different. And we started talking about this other thing that I called him, and that led into a longer conversation. And then we ended up having an even longer conversation about the issue that we had. And there were things that I pointed out and things that he pointed out that made sense at that time for some reason. And over the course of the month, things actually got better. And I was like, man, is this how this works? That you can't like put a finger on the item, but you can put, if you have a desired result, like an overall result of life, as far as a path. Is that how this works? And I hope I'm being clear here. What I mean is, like, you wouldn't say, I want $1 million by like a year from now. Like, I don't think that's how it works. But I think if you went, in a year from now, I want to be in a better financial situation, and I want to be more stable, and I want to be, I want to kind of realize some of the fruits of my labor. And then, it's broad enough. And I think that's how it works. And maybe I'm not explaining this well, but I think that's the best way, because, guys, I'm telling you, the more and more I just put positivity into the air. And I started just believing that these things are going to happen. Like, even if you don't see the path right now, keep moving forward. Don't look down. Keep moving forward. The more and more I infused this type of, I don't know, I guess you can call it lifestyle, just this type of viewpoint, it did start getting better. But here was the hard part. The hard part was remembering to do it. Remembering that positivity breeds positivity, that your faith is what breeds your destiny, because it's so easy as a human being to be negative. It's so easy when you have time on your hands to go to a negative place. My favorite thing, or I'm sorry, my one of the things I hate the most in the world is to be quiet and be alone. When I'm alone in four walls and I just have my mind to work with, it always goes to a negative place. So one of the hardest things about all this was just remembering, listen, you're in control of this. So stop being down, stop being negative. And how do you battle your own mind when you just feel a way? When something makes you upset, it's not like there's a button to push to make you happy again. Things have to take their course. So this whole process didn't feel like one step forward and two steps back. It felt like two steps forward and one step back. Like, I felt like I'm closer to the answer to what this is, this whole psychokinetic theory. But every time I would get closer, I myself would take myself a step backwards because I would forget to keep it in play. And the second that I forgot to keep that thought process in play, it's like it starts over. It's just like goals, having a goal and saying, I want to achieve this goal. And then you start working towards it and something bad happens and you immediately fall into a negative place. And you got to remind yourself, no, dude, like, get out of this. Like, this is just one event. There's no such thing as a final chance. There's no such thing as your last chance. There's no such thing as, one road to a destination. There's a million roads to a single destination. It's remembering all that. And that's one of the hardest things that I found in trying to actually put this into play. Now, I've never read the book The Secret, but a lot of people kind of told me that The Secret, it includes this type of philosophy, but it has a tendency to be more possessionary. Like in The Secret, I guess it's okay to, like, say you want certain items or certain possessions. And I'm not even saying that that's like an impossible thing, because, like, if I do believe, like, say, if somebody needed something to survive, like if I had some kind of illness and I needed a medication to survive, and I said to myself, I'm going to put it out there in the universe that I need to get this medication or find a way to get this medication to survive, I believe that it could happen that way. I believe that you could put enough positivity out there, and if you can find a way to maintain that viewpoint, I think that it could work. But I think that's the hardest part, is maintaining the viewpoint. When we were in the castle, one of the things that I never really considered is I intentionally took us out of the real world. And I put us into, a fictional fairy tale world of castles and knights and swords and oubliettes and, I shouldn't say fictional, but a different world, right? A world completely foreign to us. So it was very easy for that week to only focus on the task at hand, because I designed it to make it where that's all we could focus on. And I think that is the biggest detriment when trying to apply this philosophy in real life, is that this philosophy isn't all you have to think about. You have a billion other things in real life and a billion other temptations. So you can't stay consistent. Now, I'm not trying to be a downer and saying that, this can't be accomplished because of this. I don't believe that at all. And I think there needs to be more research done in Joey's experiment. The idea that you can change the chemical makeup of somebody's mind to feel a specific desired way. because this whole idea of having a consistent viewpoint, of remaining, keeping this philosophy in focus without ever kind of, drifting away or falling into negativity, that could be aided through chemical introduction. It could be. It's the same general concept as when someone has depression and they give them, like a consistent medication that they stay on to consistently force a chemical balance, to force an outcome and a viewpoint and the way they feel, to change those emotions and keep them steady. So if we could introduce some kind of chemical compound to the brain that could allow us to remain focused and positive and always uplifting and always moving towards the positive and always believing that this desired result will come. If we can do that through chemical introduction, then I think we actually could get somewhere with this. I think that the mind is extremely powerful, but it can work just in the opposite way. If you're negative outcomes are going to happen. And this world is hard, man. This is a hard, hard world we live in. And it's very easy to just think the worst and be negative and to just fall into that pit of despair that we've all had it, where you just don't even want to get out of fucking bed because you just have too many fears of negative things happening and too many insecurities. And, generally speaking, I'm very fortunate that I'm, for the most part, a pretty positive guy, for the most part. I definitely have my moments, but, I've never, found myself in month-long depressions or anything like that. And I've, obviously I know people who have, and I feel for them and I understand it. But I do think that there's something to be said for psychokinetic ability. And I think it's really about consistency. And if we can find a way to remain consistent and to not give up on that faith. I mean, that's why they call it faith, right? Because you don't know for sure what's going to happen, but you're moving in a direction believing that that outcome will come. Now, it's very hard to maintain that. And I think that is where the focus of future studies should be when it comes to the Blood Red Sky experiment. And I hope to God, there was a couple interviews I did when it was over where, people had said to me, and they were being critical of the study, well, you were the one that was setting up, each person's thing. You decided what each person would have done. And if they have different personalities, they would have reacted differently. And all that stuff's true. And that's why I go back to the point of, this is the start. I pray that people take this experiment and try it themselves and put it into play and refine it over and over and over again and get it to a better place. Take this study and take it to the next level. Because it was never meant to be the end of anything, but rather the beginning of something. The beginning of something. And I urge all of you, please try to put this in play in your life. Just try it. Just take 1 month out of your life, pick a destination, a goal, a place that you want to be, something you want to fix, something you want to obtain. Start working towards that and do your best no matter what happens. Even if you can't see a clear path to it, start working towards it with the faith that it's going to happen. Please try this. Please. I think if you do, I think you'll be blown away by what the results are. Because I have experienced what I believe in my heart are legitimate results from attempting to do this. Legitimate, guys. This film as a whole is an example of that. I just want to stress this one more time. Everything went right on this movie. Everything went right. Now, did it all go right because I needed it to? Because I believed it would? Because I'm very passionate about this theory? I mean, I take it back to, that one simple thing of Mary Beth switching with me at the last second of saying, you need to just do the ghost hunt, I'll do the sleep deprivation. That changed everything. And most importantly, it put me in a place where I didn't have to lie to Joe. And that was the one fucking thing, man, that I did not want to do. If she doesn't do that at the last second, it's a whole different movie, a whole different film, a whole different outcome. It's crazy. And who knows, how fate and destiny work. I mean, go back to how I met Ciaran, on this Rising project. That was a crazy scenario. And then I'm working for Spielberg, and we run out and meet them when they happen to be in Philadelphia, and I strike up this friendship. I mean, it's an incredible scenario. The entire story it was all 1 in a billion opportunities and chances that came true. And the end result, there was enough there to say there's a there. So in closing, that's what I really want to ask of you guys. Just please try this. And if I'm wrong and crazy and nothing works for you, say, Chad's crazy as shit. But please try it. And I think you will be really, really surprised by the outcome. And thank you guys for listening to, almost 10 hours of this journey. It was a special journey. This will probably be my favorite film I've ever made for that reason, that it was so unique and so special and so different. And it all came together in such a unique way. It was just really magical. And that's the best way, or best word I could use to describe the entire process, is it was magical. And to everybody, who helped me make it, they all know who they are. I am forever in debt. Forever. I mean, this is just truly special. And, it taught me something that I'm still trying. I still use the Blood Red Sky experiment principles today. I still try all the time. And like I said, the hardest part is the consistency, but I still try today because I believe in the results. And I think that you guys will find validity in those beliefs and the results as well. Thank you guys for listening to A Blood Red Sky, my notes from the most haunted structure in the world.